Okay. Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining VAIREX at the virtual Hanover Messe. This will be recorded so that those of you that want to watch it later or don't get bored with me the first time or didn't see it the first time have an opportunity. Let me share the screen and I will walk you through the presentation. Please don't feel free to put reactions or raise your hand and ask questions anytime you want. So VAIREX Air Systems is based in Boulder, Colorado, and we're a leading manufacturer of air systems for fuel cells. And we'll talk about what that means in a minute. But first, we believe that the world is beginning the end of the age of combustion. You know, fire was a good friend of mankind. It basically created us. It created civilization. We depend on it in so many ways. The little micro explosions inside our cars, the big fires inside our power plants, the fires on our kitchen stoves, but it's too much of a good thing. Time to move on. And the way we're going to move on is by electrifying everything. The parts of that electrification that VAIREX is interested in or participates in is particularly the intersection between urban transport, renewable energy, and hydrogen and fuel cells. Urban transport, electrifying urban transport is how you get the massive pollution problems out of the inner cities, which particularly are acute in China right now. Renewable energy is how you generate zero carbon electricity, which can also be converted into hydrogen and used in fuel cells for an efficient way to power our economy without carbon emissions. The picture there is a small delivery truck used in Europe primarily, although we see them all over. The truck's manufactured by Renault, the fuel cell inside manufactured by a VAIREX customer, Symbio, and the air system inside is manufactured by VAIREX. So we're a fuel cell compressor manufacturer. Fuel cells run on hydrogen or other fuels, but they also run on air. What fuel cells do in a nutshell is they take air and fuel and convert it directly into electricity without combustion and the associated emissions. So we're a scale-up company. We're growing fast. We're an established supplier in the global fuel cell industry. We'll talk about the segments in a moment. And we build cathode air compressors. The cathode is the part of the fuel cell that air goes into. Primarily, our markets are 30 to 60 kilowatt fuel cells. We have over 12,000 units in the field. I know for a long time, people said that fuel cells was the best idea that never happened, but we'll hit 15,000 shipped units sometime this summer. Our headquarters are in Boulder, Colorado in the United States, and we have sales offices in Tokyo, Seoul, and Shanghai, which may also give you a hint as to where we think the center of gravity of the fuel cell industry is going. The bottom row is pictures of our products. That leftmost picture is a prototype for a 1 kilowatt fuel cell. That's actually my hand. It's even my watch. The middle picture is what we call a VRB8. That's our best seller, represents the majority of our sales. And on the right is a first prototype for a big fuel cell for a roughly 45 kilowatt fuel cell range extender, which could be applied primarily to urban trucks and buses. And right now, mostly in Europe and Asia. We're also seeing emerging markets for commercial vehicles, larger commercial vehicles in the United States. We think those will have bigger fuel cells than that. A quick look at the markets. Right now, our big markets, fuel cell material handling, otherwise known as forklifts. During the time of COVID, what we saw, particularly in the United States, was a huge shift towards online everything, but especially online food distribution. And in the online food distribution business, particularly if you're somebody like Amazon Fresh or Walmart or Kroger, and you're operating million square foot, 100,000 square meter, 24/7 warehouses, fuel cell forklifts have turned out to be the economically superior solution. Basically, a battery forklift that runs that way needs 3 batteries, and you spend time changing them every 8 hours. Fuel cell needs to be refilled once a day. Takes about 5 minutes to fill the hydrogen tank. So right now, this is primarily a United States market, but we're seeing huge movement in Europe and Asia in the near future. We're shipping product for samples and product development right now. These are typically 5 to 15 kilowatt fuel cells. We'll see higher power in the future. Volumes, the volume key is now, is the first number, and then there's a slash, roughly the global projection for 2025, and a slash and the global projection for 2040. This is growing a little faster than we thought when we first did this, particularly because of the online push I referred to. The next line is fuel cell range extenders, or REX, small truck and taxi. Customers are people like La Poste, the French Postal Service, FedEx, Paris Taxi. We're seeing big take up by UPS, DHL, other shippers for last mile. Right now, this is primarily an EU market. We see pretty big expansion in the United States and Asia in the future. These fuel cells are a little bigger, 15 to 25 kilowatts, and significantly higher in the future. Volumes today are about 500 a year, growing to 20,000 and 100,000 by 2040. It's, for what it's worth, VAIREX is inside all of these fuel cells on the top row and also in this second row. Can't quite see it. I don't know if you can see my pointer, a little silver thing right under the hood of that Nissan. That's a fuel cell range extender taxi being developed for the Paris market. That little silver box is the VAIREX air compressor. Probably the only picture in this presentation we can actually see our product. Third market we participate in is residential fuel cells. That market started primarily Japan at 1 kilowatt, actually less than 1 kilowatt for apartments. We think the big growth is China and Korea. Right now, our biggest market's Korea. Volumes are 50,000 this year, almost all that any farm, although big things are happening in Korea, and there's hundreds rapidly moving to thousands in that market. But about 50,000 this year, 100,000 or more by 2025, and 500,000 a year by 2040. A lot of indication this is going to go faster. Certainly with what we're seeing in China, Korea, could push that market along rather quickly. Then there's distributed, and we're in some of these products, not so much in the 1 kilowatt, more the slightly larger one, which is the next line. This is what we call distributed generation, CHP. CHP stands for combined heat and power. Fuel cells make electricity, but they also make heat. And in the bottom row, you will see a handful of fuel cell products in that category. The one on the far right is a really interesting product. It's basically a boiler that uses the fuel cells heat to boil water and or make steam, depending on the application. Those come in both 3 and 5 kilowatt sizes, and for that particular customer, they also have VAIREX inside. Volumes this year around the world, 8,000. We're in a substantial portion of those, growing to 40,000 and 100,000 a year as we go forward. Now moving into emerging markets. These are markets, unlike the first page, which are here today. These are markets that are coming. The first is other off-road equipment, automatic guided vehicles, airport ground support equipment, man lifts, agriculture. This is a big market in the United States, EU, and Asia, but all in the future. These are typically 55 to 50 kilowatts fuel cells, depending on the application. Today, the volumes are samples. Customers are buying 1 or 5 or 10. They're doing product development, early field trials. We see this growing to 1,000 and 10,000 units a year. Relatively small market, but a really interesting niche that builds on everything that went before. Then you've got mid-sized truck and bus, what we might call an urban truck and bus. These are transit buses and regional buses. The big market today is China, with Korea, the EU, and the United States following. These are typically 60 to 120 kilowatt fuel cells, sometimes ganging up 15 or 20 kilowatt modules to get to those power levels. Some of these have more than one fuel cell. Some have more than one complete fuel cell engine, so that if one engine fails, you can raise the power level of the one that's still working and operate on about 2/3 of your rated power. Volumes today are in the hundreds, moving to 50,000 and 100,000 over that period. Something's certainly gotten a lot of attention in the United States is long haul trucks. This is a market we really didn't see coming 3 or 4 years ago. These are high horsepower, long range. This is a truck, that Nikola, that white truck, a batch of those being built for a large American beer company to basically make the run from San Diego to Chicago, which is a couple thousand miles. Typically 150 to 300 kilowatts. Once again, volumes are low. Samples today moving to 10,000 and 50,000. Last, and certainly gotten a lot of attention in the world, is sedans and SUVs based on fuel cells. You see the Toyota Mirai is the blue one on the left, the Hyundai Nexo, which is the best seller in the world today, in the middle, and the Honda Clarity over on the right. Japan and Korea led this market at the beginning. EU's following. We think China will be a market here as well in the future. A lot of this, of course, unlike all the previous applications, which are typically return to base, the fuel cells never leave home like a forklift or like a FedEx truck. They go home to the same place every night. Passenger cars have a special challenge, which is rolling out a hydrogen infrastructure. You'll see in 2 of those 3 pictures, the cars parked next to a hydrogen filling station. And we're seeing substantial deployments across Europe, especially in Germany, big deployments planned in the United States and other European countries and Japan. Korea and China are already pretty well on the road. These are typically 50 to 125 kilowatts, 50 if they use a range extender architecture, and 125 if the fuel cell is the prime mover. Right now, that's about 8,000 a year, growing literally to the millions by 2040. And last, a couple of interesting specialty applications. The numbers are never going to get very big, but the price points could be pretty high. First is marines, ferry support vessels, coastal freight. We're even seeing some proposals for long haul shipping, trans-Pacific scale shipping. Those would not run on hydrogen. They would run on ammonia or alcohol or something. And these are being developed all over the US, quite a lot of them in EU and some in Japan. Really high power levels for marine, starting at 100 kilowatt, literally going up to megawatts. And then last, commuter trains. This is a diesel alternative for the edge of the overhead wire. What you'll see in commuter trains all over the world is that the dense center city is overhead wire electric. But when you get out to the edges, typically the overhead wire falls away. And so these are traditionally powered either diesel or often dual fuel, where they run electricity when they're under the wire and they switch to diesel when the wire stops. Interesting fact is it costs almost as much to build and maintain the overhead wire that's over the train as it costs to build and maintain the track that's under the train. So the capital cost of extending the wire to the very edges is pretty prohibitive. And what fuel cells allow you to do is to run the same way, under the wire when you can, and zero carbon when you're outside at the edge. Volumes today are samples heading into hundreds and thousands. So let's talk about our technology. The radical simplicity of the VAIREX compressor technology drives the whole business. It drives the design process, it designs the manufacturing process, it drives our capital requirements. And the picture is of an impeller inside our compressor. And what we did 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago, is when we picked this technology, is we didn't start with a complicated technology and try and make it cheap enough. We'd already done that in my previous company and saw the limits of that strategy. So what we did is we started with the simplest possible technology. This is basically a plastic fan in a housing on the end of a motor. And then we just made it good enough. When we first adopted the regenerative blower, which was invented in Germany in the 1930s, we looked at that and said, if we could double the pressure and double the efficiency, then we would potentially have a product which would be cost effective and durable and easy to manufacture and easy to tool for the requirements of the fuel cell industry that we saw coming. Well, we did that. In fact, we tripled the efficiency and tripled the pressure, and we think there's probably get to 4x on both of those before we're done. What that's allowed us to do is build a whole product line for products for 1 to 30 kilowatts. This is the core of our original business. And what we basically created was almost like a set of Lego blocks, a set of different size compressor heads. They come in what we call VRB2, VRB4, VRB6. That's on the top row. The middle row is variations on VRB8s, and the bottom row is variations on VRB32s. They can come in single or double stages depending on the pressure. You can mix and match motors. Basically, we have adopted a series of motors and had them configured so that you can pretty much put any motor on any compressor head. So we take customer requirements, we put the Lego blocks together in the right configuration, and we ship product. And so what this allows us to do is, for relatively low development and capital costs, we can cover that entire range. Like I said, we've got 12,000 of them in the field. The 50 million hours is obsolete. I think we're close to 100 million hours of cumulative operation in the field over the fleet. Failure rate in the field is proven to be quite low, and the durability is proving to be a little better than we predicted. What's coming is a new series of products that we're working on right now for 45 kilowatt fuel cells and up. We're also working on, for 2 applications, cathode air compressors, our traditional business, and anode gas recirculation, sometimes known as HRB, for hydrogen recirculation blower. So AGRs or HRBs are interchangeable terms. Urban fuel cell vehicles going to need one of each. You'll need an air compressor to power the fuel cell, and you'll need a recirculation blower primarily to improve the fuel efficiency a little bit. And cathode air blowers, the products in development currently called VRC 44s, 64s, 128s. There's actually a 144 special for one customer in China. They come in single and double stages. The earlier picture you saw was a 2-stage. That was the highest pressure version. The picture here is a single stage. This happens to be the highest flow version. On the right, you'll see a hydrogen recirculation blower. This is an early sort of proof of concept samples that we built for a customer. What we were able to prove was that the mechanical arrangement of this prototype worked well enough to test, was not intended for production, and never will be. We have a much simpler way to do it. But what we did prove is that the regenerative blower technology works very well on hot, wet anode gas. We've mapped the difference between operating on hydrogen and operating on air, and have a pretty good idea how to design these going forward. Our manufacturing process, right, is fast precision assembly. It takes us about 12 minutes to put one together. They're all built today at our Colorado headquarters, and we currently have a capacity of 60,000 units a year. Our assembly line, like I said, less than 15 minutes, and we test 100% of the production at the end of the line. We're very competitive at the kind of gross margin, price competitive at margins that make this a viable business. What's really important about this is that the low capital cost of the manufacturing system, which follows the simplicity, underlying fundamental simplicity of the technology, allows us to localize production when the volume supports. And this was key to our whole business plan from the beginning, is that we think globalization is a force that's running the ant to the end of its line. We're seeing a lot of trade friction, tariffs, other non-tariff barriers. And so one of the things we thought 10 years ago when we started this project was that when the day came, we would have to be able to cost effectively build our products in all the major markets of the world. I mean, what our customers are learning is they don't want a factory halfway around the world and products stuck in a container on a ship that's stuck in the middle of the Suez Canal. They want their factory across the street. We've had customers ask us if they could loan us enough space in their factory that we could literally put our factory inside their factory. And so the shipping of the blower to the customer consists of putting it on a cart and rolling it across the room. The nice thing about the way we do things is that the volume it takes to make economic sense for us is actually quite low. So there are big things coming from VAIREX. Watch this space. You will see some exciting announcements over the next few months that will substantially increase our reach and our resources and our ability to serve you as customers. For today, here's our contacts of our key representatives around the world. I'm Ski Milburn, Chief Executive Officer based in Boulder, or in the old days on an airplane. Hopefully those days return and I'll get to come see some of you. Jim Hishinuma runs VAIREX Asia. He's president of VAIREX Asia Pacific, our Tokyo sales office. Eric Wu works for one of our motor suppliers and based in Shanghai, supporting Chinese customers. And Sammy Choi, a investor in VAIREX and president of Choi's Technics, a well-known and reputable distributor of all sorts of things, electric power cables and VAIREX compressors and other things for vehicle electrification based in Seoul. So I want to thank you very much for listening. We've got a few more minutes before they turn me off. If you have any questions, or raise your hand. I see a chat. I will jump on it and see what it says. Oh, that's just Homer saying you have a question and you're in my Zoom link. You can do it that way. And I believe you can ask questions if you came in through the Hanover Mesa link. Both of those should be operating right now. And thanks for coming. So that should turn off any second, right? Yeah. Yep. Okay, I believe the Hanover Mesa link will stop at any moment. Oh, okay. We're done. Yep, and I'm going to turn off recording. You need to press the stop, the square. Oh, is that what does it? This thing? Yeah.